everyone, my name is Shea. I am one of the clinicians at your TSIG Wellness Center, and I'm here today to talk about the Pap Smear, everyone's favorite test, or everyone's most dreaded test. I know that this is not a fan favorite, but that's all the more reason for me to be here today advocating for you to stay up to date on your screening. So as we dive into this, let's talk a little bit about what is a Pap smear, why do we perform them? So a Pap smear is a test for cervical cancer. A lot of people think that when we perform a Pap smear that we're also testing for STDs or vaginal infections, sexually transmitted infections, but we're not. We're only looking at the cells and sometimes at the DNA to see if there are signs of cervical cancer. So with that, you will hear about HPV. So where does cervical cancer come from? Majority of the time, cervical cancer comes from HPV. HPV stands for the human papillomavirus. That's a mouthful, so we just call it HPV. There's hundreds of strains of HPV, and I think the best way to kind of think of this is we're all very familiar with COVID at this point. COVID is a virus, just like human papillomavirus is a virus as well. And viruses, in order for them to survive, they need to mutate. And so just like with COVID, how we had that original strain, and then we had Delta, and then we had Omicron, and we're going to have more and more to come, I'm sure. We have that with HPV. There's numerous strains of HPV. However, thankfully with science and technology, we've been able to isolate the strains of HPV that are most likely to cause cervical cancer. So when we do an HPV co-test, those are the strains that we're looking for. So what is this testing that I'm talking about? So the difference between the two is a Pap smear. First, they're both performed at the same time. It's just the test that's run at the lab that's different. So a Pap smear, I use a little brush to scrape off some cells from your cervix that's sent out to the lab. For the Pap smear, they actually look at those cells on a slide and they look to see if there's any abnormal changes to the cells. If there aren't, then great. And then the HPV test, it's actually looking for the DNA of HPV, meaning that you have an HPV infection. So when should you get screened? This can be a confusing place for patients and for providers because it's very patient specific. It's age specific and patient specific. But the general guideline is that you have your first Pap smear at age 21. This can be different if you have a disease that suppresses your immune system or if you're on immunosuppressive medications. So if you're under 21 and you fall into that category, then have an appointment with me and we'll discuss if that's something that you need to have done earlier. Also at age 21, we do just the Pap smear. So there's no HPV co-testing. And this goes hand in hand with why we also don't test until you're 21. That's because when you're younger, you have youth on your side, your immune system is top-notch, and the vast majority of women, if they contract HPV, which most people do in their lifetime, their body fights it off and cures it. Usually, I believe the cure rate is within 1 year, it'll be gone. So we don't have to be as concerned or monitor it as closely in women that are under 21. So age 21, you get your first Pap smear, we take a look at it, everything comes back perfect, great, we high five, we don't have to do another Pap smear until 3 years from then. If you do have some abnormal cells, that's okay. It's a good thing you came in and got it done because now we're going to go ahead and take action and see, do we need to repeat your Pap smear? Do you need to maybe go and see a gynecologist so that we can do some additional testing? But from there, we'll have to kind of alter your treatment plan. Once you turn 30, that's when we start the HPV co-testing. So you can choose to continue with just Pap smears. So every 3 years, you just have your cells looked at, your cervical cells. But most women, and usually my recommendation, is that you will add on the co-testing, and that's typically what I do for patients, for HPV. And from there, if it all comes back normal, so normal Pap smear, no HPV detected, then great. No repeat testing for 5 years. If you want to continue with the just Pap smear on its own, then you still stay on that every 3-year schedule. I The reason for that, and the reason I advocate for the HPV co-testing, is because we know that the majority of HPV, or the majority of cervical cancer, comes from HPV. So if you don't have the HPV, then it's very unlikely that you're going to develop cervical cancer. All right. So with all of that said, to kind of wrap it all up in a nutshell, it can be a little bit confusing. Come in and have an appointment if you don't know if you're up to date, and we'll figure it out together. The main reason we're doing this is to prevent cancer. Also, you get a $25 gift card once you get up to date, so that's an added little benefit you probably won't find anywhere else. And then another way we can combat this and try to keep cervical cancer at bay is that we do offer the Gardasil, so the HPV vaccine, and that used to be just for children or kind of preteen area, but that age limit has actually been extended all the way up to age 45. So if that's something you're interested in, please give us a call, come on in, and we'll keep you healthy. Thank you, and have a good day.